happened. And that was actually after I'd given my second Harvard lecture. And on immediately after October 7th, maybe around October 15th or 18th, I signed a letter along with 750 other writers from around the world. You can still find it in the London Review of Books and judge for yourself. That was a letter calling for a ceasefire. If you go read that letter today, it reads as if it could be written for today. Saying we need a ceasefire. Yes, it's a horrible tragedy when civilians of all sides are killed, but this is a concerted campaign to commit genocide against Palestinians as well. And we need to lift the embargo, all this kind of stuff is still really relevant. And then I was scheduled to, I went to New York City, and in the morning of October 25th or something, I was on CBS Morning Show. It was great, it was awesome. And then I was supposed to appear at an event at the 92nd Street Y in New York City, and that got canceled that very day. So that actually made some national news. And I think that the reason, obviously, that I got canceled was because I had signed the letter, but also I posted that on Instagram. Okay, and I said, at that time, one of the Israeli ministers, I think it was Ben-Gvir, had described Palestinians as human animals. And when I heard that phrase, I knew immediately what that meant. I mean, the first lecture or two in this book is actually about the process of colonization. And the fact that when colonization happens, it happens with a rhetoric of humanism. Like, we are going to bring humanity and civilization to these poor natives, and if they don't agree, we'll kill them. So somehow, again, to save and to destroy, that humanity also includes inhumanity. It's been a process, and it's not unique to the West, I mean, it happens in every context, but in the process of global colonization in the last half century, there has been a process of Western colonization. So when he described Palestinians as human animals, I thought, I'm a human animal. And so I concluded an Instagram post by saying, count me among the human animals. So I got in trouble about that. And then I felt that I could not possibly appear at the next Norton lecture and not talk about the war that was going on right then. And so all these lectures have been pre-scripted with their titles. The title of the third lecture was on the death of Asian Americans. And so I hadn't planned to write about Palestine, but I thought it fit in there. And I had to think about how can I talk about Palestine in the context of Asian Americans. And I thought about the fact that when part of my conversion process into becoming an Asian American was that I read Edward Said's Orientalism. I wrote one of my senior theses on Graham Greene's The Quiet American, which is his novel about the Vietnam War, and I applied Said's Orientalism to it. And I read, Said very closely. But for myself and a lot of Asian Americans who were influenced by Said and used his work as a basis for being Asian American, being opposed to being called Orientals, so many of us didn't do the hard work of understanding and connecting what he was arguing about, which is that for him, the Oriental was only marginally in his interests East Asians and Southeast Asians. He did talk about that a little bit in Orientalism, but he was primarily concerned with Muslims and Arab Americans in what was then being described as the Near East and the Far East, the Near East and the Middle East, and which we might now call West Asia and Southwest Asia. So for him, the Oriental was Palestinian. At least one version of Oriental was Palestinian. So that lecture tries to make these connections between how do we go from the Oriental as being Arab, Muslim, and Palestinian to being East and Southeast Asian in a way in which that connection for so many Asian Americans of my kind, my appearance, that link has been broken. Which is why so many Asian Americans are willing to speak out against anti-Asian racism, for example, but they're not willing to speak out against genocide, and they're not willing to make the connections between Arab Americans and Muslim Americans and Palestinians and Asian American causes in the United States. But if we're going to engage in processes and movements of struggle and solidarity, we cannot separate racism from colonization. We cannot separate what's happened in the United States' role in East and Southeast Asia from the American role in supporting Israel in Gaza and in Palestine. And so for me, there's a total continuity between my work in being deeply critical of what the United States and France has done in the Vietnam War and understanding that the United States took all the wrong lessons from the Vietnam War. The 50th anniversary of the end of the American War in Vietnam just happened.
I forgot to wish you happy anniversary.
Thank you so much. Yes.
All last week, you gotta remember, happy 50th.
I know, happy 50th. I was like dreading this day. I was like, oh my God, they're gonna call me as a professional Vietnamese, aren't they? And they did. But every time they did, I was insistent on saying the point of remembering this is, yes, of course, to remember this specific history, this specific war, these specific people. And even then, the United States does a terrible job because we only talk about Vietnam. The war happened in Cambodia and Laos. More people died who were Cambodian, Hmong, Lao as a result of the war than the Vietnamese, right? But that's also been obscured. But the other reason to talk about it is to say that we turn to the past in order to understand our present. And if we do, again, the United States has learned all the wrong lessons from the Vietnam War. What we should have learned is do not interfere in other countries, do not interfere in other countries' wars of liberation and independence, do not support genocide, do not bomb civilians, do not supply bombs to other countries, but instead the lessons that the United States has learned, if we look at our presidents, Democratic or Republican, this is bipartisan, if you look at the speeches of Democratic and Republican presidents, starting with Jimmy Carter said this was a war of mutual destruction. That is patently false. Americans might feel that it was a process of mutual destruction, and 58,000 plus American soldiers dying is a tragedy, but 3 million Vietnamese people died, and millions of Cambodians, Laotians, and Hmong died. It was not mutual destruction. But Americans reinforcing that sense of themselves, that they were victims of all this, has led to the United States repeating its wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and now supporting Israel in Gaza as well. So that is my takeaway from the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. Don't dwell on your own victimization. Think about how, if you do that, what is probably going to happen is that you will turn around and victimize somebody else. That's a lesson the United States has failed to learn.